Okay, great. Hi, everyone. We are live on YouTube. We're just going to get things set up over on our website and on Facebook as well. Hang tight for just a second if you're with us already. All right, and there's that ding to let me know we are on our website. And we're going to go ahead and start. Let me share my screen. How many times have you guys heard that this week? Okay, great. Kick us off, Jody.
Hi, everybody. Happy Monday. My name is Jody Golden, and I'm the Chief of Staff for Lieutenant Governor Suzanne Crouch, and I'm so excited to be kicking off this program today with the DDC and the IAC. So Lieutenant Governor Crouch oversees 4 agencies, which include the Indiana State Department of Agriculture, the Office of Community and Rural Affairs, the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority, and the newly created Indiana Destination Development Corporation, along with our Indiana Broadband Office. All of these agencies' missions and visions are at some level connected to enhancing the quality of life for all of our Hoosiers across the great state. Governor Holcomb and she are both very strong advocates for the arts, cultural, and tourism industries and appreciate the value they provide to making Indiana a place where people want to play and stay. Therefore, they felt it critical that the state do what we can to assist our artists, our museums, our festivals, and destinations and other similar organizations throughout this new grant program. As we all know, COVID has impacted everyone. And although many events have been canceled and destinations may have been closed temporarily, they want to see to it that these organizations live to see another day and continue to bless our communities and our Hoosiers. We need these cultural amenities to continue to develop and maintain our strong, passionate, and creative areas. So preserving these institutions whose normal business has been interrupted by COVID is absolutely critical. That being said, the Lieutenant Governor was thrilled to bring together the newly created Indiana Destination Development Corporation and the awesome Indiana Arts Commission, since the work they both do every day centers on preserving and enhancing the arts, cultural, and tourism industries. The dedication both of these teams have for this industry is second to none. And I know that Lieutenant Governor could not be more confident in their ability to support such a vital piece of Indiana's quality of place and quality of life. So on behalf of Lieutenant Governor Crouch, I'd like to thank both Lewis and Elaine and the DDC and IAC teams for all of the work that they put into bringing this together and the work they'll continue to do throughout this program. I'd also like to thank each and every one of you for joining us today and for doing what you do for your communities and your regions across the state. So thank you. We look forward to working with you. And with that, I will kick it over to Lewis and Elaine to get into the details. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jody. We're excited to be here. I want to welcome my colleague, Elaine.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Lewis. Yes, this is an exciting day. We're excited to have this up and running and available to all of you. So hopefully you have lots of questions and we can provide some good information and some good answers. So I will say if there's a question we can't answer, we obviously will get back to you.
We're excited. We know that you're excited. As of webinar time today, we have almost 600 people on this webinar, and I think we have almost 60 applications already started in our system. So we know that you're anxious and looking forward to this opportunity, and we hope that this provides some good basic information for you to determine whether or not you should apply to the program and what might be applicable to it. So we thought we would start by saying who is eligible to apply for this program. So to be eligible for the program, you need to be a private not-profit tax-exempt organization incorporated in the state of Indiana with a 501c3 status from the Internal Revenue Service that does one of the following. And by the way, the not-for-profit sector is only one of 3 sectors here that we're going to go over. But the not-for-profit sector, you need to be a producer, a promoter, or presenter of art and cultural activities for the public, such as workshops, classes, exhibitions, performances, and festivals. And you need to provide public access, or you need to provide public access to physical collections, such as exhibits or a museum, a botanical garden, historical societies, and zoos. You will recognize, certainly the cultural community, that this broadens a little bit the traditional definition of arts and culture that the IAC usually utilizes for many of its programs, to include history organizations, botanical gardens, zoos, and other such things that have collections, as well as all sorts of festivals in our state as well. The second category is a local unit of government applying on behalf of an eligible arts and cultural activity, such as a festival, or through a public asset, such as a library or a parks and recreation department, or perhaps a performing arts facility that the municipality owns. And for eligible arts and cultural activities as defined in the first point that I said with the not-for-profit. So that definition of arts and cultural still applies. Also, you should note that any private not-for-profit can apply even if their mission is not primarily arts and culture. You can apply for the portion of your operations that pertain to arts and culture as defined by the criteria, the categories that I outlined for you. So that's the basic parameter: 501c3 or a governmental unit, arts and culture as defined by those categories. And it could either be the primary thing you do as an organization, or just one aspect of your services to your community. Elaine, I'll let you talk about our tourism folks and
Absolutely.
there.
The third category is the destination marketing organizations. And we know that many of you, all of you, basically have been truly impacted during this COVID-19 period. Innkeeper's tax many times is your main source of revenue. And we know that without people staying in hotels, there was not that type of revenue generated to be shared with you. So we know that you've done your best to try and market your areas, but we wanted to help you because we know how important you are to our hospitality and leisure industry, as well as to your communities and to the economic development. So if you are a destination marketing organization, generally a 501c3, you are eligible. Now we know that there are other formations out there as well who serve that same capacity in the absence of a destination marketing organization. You likewise are eligible for this as well. So if you're a tourism commission serving in that capacity, if you do this through your local chamber, then everyone is eligible to make application, again, for the eligible expenses that we will be providing grant money for. So we're pleased to be able to do this along with the arts and culture organizations.
Thanks, Elaine. We should also probably tell people who is not eligible to apply. This is obviously, we have a limited amount of funds. $10 million sounds like a lot of funds, but when applied to a state like Indiana and all the assets we have, it's really fairly limited. So here are the types of organizations that are ineligible to apply. First, for-profit organizations. So this would be live music venues that are for-profit, or galleries that are for-profit, as well as artists that run their own businesses. So all of that is not eligible to apply. Any organization whose sole or primary purpose is to fundraise. So this would include friends of groups, foundations, these sorts of things. Public colleges and universities and entities that receive state level operating support or non-project support, i.e. facility support directly from the Indiana General Assembly. So if you have a line item somewhere in the budget of the state, you are exempt from this program. And then organizations who are not located in Indiana or whose service does not primarily serve Indiana residents. So for instance, if you are an organization that is in Ohio and part of your service area you consider to be in Indiana, if you are located outside of Indiana or it's not your primary service to Indiana residents, you would be not eligible to apply. Elaine, is there anything that you want to add to that as an explanation or a caveat?
No, I think you covered it nicely. Thank you, Louis.
Sure. And then I think what we want to do next was to talk about eligible expenses as far as CARES money is concerned. This can be a little complex because it's a federal legislation that has some pretty specific particulars associated with it. So it is primarily for salary support for one or more positions that are critical to the organization's artistic or destination focused operations and services. It's for fees for artists and or eligible contracted personnel. So the personnel does not have to be on salary to you. It could be contracted personnel that are critical to the organization's operations and services. And facility operational costs. This would be things such as rent, mortgage, utilities, equipment, information technology, security, insurance, building maintenance, cleaning services, et cetera, et cetera. I should also note that for these three categories, there are some differences for the local municipalities. And we'll try to get into that a little bit because of, again, some of the things that are included in the CARES legislation, as well as available in other ways to access CARES money through the state of Indiana. So we'll get into that a little bit as well. It can also be used for canceled event production costs. So this would be such things as venue fees, technical support, equipment rental, or fees, those sorts of things. And then I'm gonna let Elaine talk a little bit about marketing expenses as it pertains to the destination marketing organizations. Elaine.
Thank you, Louis. Yes, as far as the destination marketing organization goes, going back up to the top, you can use this for salary for positions that are critical again to the DMO. And again, all of you, I think I can say in general, were not eligible for the payroll protection program that the federal government put out. So you have not had that kind of a support either. So the PPP was ineligible for you. So here's an opportunity to make up for some of that salary. And in the second one, again, if you had contractual personnel that were critical, you had to lay off or end their contract, this is something that you can use that for as well. And then, of course, facility costs. Probably won't have as much in the canceled event production cost as maybe one of the arts and culture organizations may have. But with marketing expenses, you can use these funds, this grant money, for helping reopen the hospitality and leisure related entities. So the Hoosier Hospitality Promise campaign that's undergoing right now, it can be used for that, as well as any other marketing campaign. It can't be used for anything new or anything that was not COVID related. In other words, if you're thinking about promoting a new activity that you're starting next year, you can't do that. Again, as was noted in the slide before, the eligible expenses need to have occurred between March 1st of this year and December 30th. And what that means is they had to be used during those times. Now, the actual payment for a service or a product that you purchased before December 30th can actually have their payment in the 90 days following year end, but it still had to be incurred and utilized during this calendar year. So March 1st through December 30th. So again, and again, the marketing expenses is to help that reopening process for the economy.
Thank you, Elaine. let's talk a little bit about ineligible expenses now. So ineligible expenses include new arts or cultural programs and services, general marketing and promotional expenses not related to the impact of COVID-19, and or resale items purchased to sell, which would be concessions and promotional merchandise, strategic planning expenses and or expenses related to developing a long-term plan, cash reserves, consumable supplies and materials, with the exception of PPE, is allowable to be expensed here. So anything that would be related to increasing the safety and security from a public health standpoint of your organization would be allowable here. Capital acquisitions, activities that are solely for the purpose of fundraising, private functions, religious service, lobbying activities, or anything non-public, the cost of entertainment, and also revenue replacement for municipalities and local units of government. A little more about local units of government. There are basically two items to stress about whether or not you should apply for these funds. First of all, there is another fund available through the Indiana Finance Authority, other CARES money for local municipalities. This should be your first stop for CARES money as a municipality. And things that would not fit into that would fit into this program could be applied for, but that should be your first level of looking. Secondly, any expense that was not in the municipality's budget when the CARES Act was passed, which is that March date, is ineligible. So the idea here is if there was something, this CARES money is not intended to replace local tax money. So if you had a civic budget with an item in it, which was supported by tax dollars, that cannot be an eligible expense. It's obviously you'd be applying for it because of the lack of local tax dollars, and the CARES money is not intended for that purpose. So there are some caveats for local municipalities that are material here. It becomes a little complex, and certainly as we open this up, our program officers can help you sort out some of those things as a local municipality. But just to be aware, there are some more restrictions for local municipalities than there are for local not-for-profits and the DMOs, the destination marketing organizations. As Elaine said, this is for eligible expenses incurred between March 1st, 2020 and December 30th, 2020. And payment for these expenditures using these funds must take place within 90 days of December 31st or March 31st. So the expenses have to be incurred and applicable to that period between March 1st and December 30th. The actual payment can be processed after that within 90 days. Something again to note. Also, you cannot use this CARES money for the identical expense that you've used other CARES money for. So if you have already expensed to some other CARES source some expenses that are eligible, you cannot do those same expenses. So that, for instance, if you were doing personnel costs, it could not be for the same person for the same time frame as you did for other CARES sources. So and this also points up to the fact that if you've received other CARES monies, you can still apply here, but you cannot apply these expense categories to expense items to the same expense items that you have covered with other CARES monies. So I think we should probably now turn this over to the application overview. Elaine, do you have anything else you want to tell people till we turn this over to Paige and Adam to talk about the application and how to apply?
Well, I think the easy thing to remember is that only COVID-related impact can be used. So any expenses due to the impact of COVID-19 can be used. So keep thinking of that in your mind. You know, you can't, and as Louis was saying, you have to incur the cost of your program, and you have to incur the services before December 30th. So if you plan a marketing program that's not going to happen until first quarter of next year, it will not be eligible, even if you can pay for it prior to December 30th. The marketing campaign had to happen prior to year end. So it's just something to keep in mind as you're looking through all of these things. And I think just to reemphasize, if you have received CARES Act money from any source, be it the NEA or IAC or PPP, all of that has to be identified. And just remember, you can't spend multiple dollars for the same expense. So you can't attribute it there. And I will remind you that the IDDC will have to turn in reports. And so we'll need all of the detail that you're going to be spending dollars on. So receipts, great record keeping will help us, because in some cases you may get audited as well. But we have to be able to turn all of that in, and those reports will start relatively quickly, but we'll have a final report that we'll need to get in by March 30th or something. So be aware of that as you're going through this process. Thanks, Louis.
Thanks, Elaine. And I'm going to turn it over to Paige Sharp and Adam from IDDC, and to go over our application overview.
Great. Thank you, Louis. I'm Paige. I'm with the Indiana Arts Commission. I'm the Deputy Director of Programs, and I've got the really easy part for this webinar. And I just want to assure you that all of that might have sounded a little complicated. Rest assured, our online system where you apply for a grant, it's not complicated at all. It's actually pretty intuitive and simple to use. You'll just navigate to the online system at www.in.gov/arts/apply. And I recommend to go ahead and bookmark that on your browser bar so it's easy to get to the next time, because it's easy to forget where you got the link. We do it all the time ourselves, trust me on that. So once you get there, you'll simply either, if you're already a grantee of the Indiana Arts Commission, you'll just log in. If you're not, then you will just go ahead and go to get an account, create an account. And a heads up, when you do start that application, everything automatically saves, which is super nice. And it's also internet-based, so you can always go back to it at any time. Whenever stopping point, you're just like, I'm tired of working on this, you can always go back. It's not a problem. So in any event, when you create your account, just like any other place that you go to create an account, you have to provide a bunch of different information. So you'll go through that with us. And then if you do have a question, we have a short video that we will post on our webpage for this program, as well as the webpage on visitindianatourism.org. So once you get registered, then you'll just click the button, apply, and that'll get you started in the application. And when you do get into the application, be sure to start it before you begin so that you can have access or know who to contact if you need help. There's a link to a frequently asked question page that we will continuously update to respond to some of your questions. And there's the contact information for us to help you address those questions. And then also a link to the guidelines. I do, based upon some of your questions, want to give you a heads up that this program does not require a match. So one thing I do want to give you a tip when working with the online system is to use Google Chrome as your browser. It tends to operate best with that particular browser. It works with others, just a little bit more seamlessly with that one. When you do upload documents, be sure that they're all combined into one document. It doesn't have multiple document opportunity. It's just one. You combine them and upload it, and they all have to be in PDF format. So save yourself some time and make sure that's all combined into one document before you go ahead and upload. And I also suggest checking to make sure you have the correct version before you submit your application, because once you submit it, that's it. So be sure to get it well before the deadline. When you submit, if it doesn't go through, it'll let you know what you need to do to correct it and get it through. So moving forward, if you have any questions, you can reach out to Adam or myself. The teams are here to help you address questions, but please refer to that frequently asked question document, because that'll have a lot of information in there for you. It already does. Adam, why don't you walk everybody through the application itself?
Absolutely. The application is split into 6 primary sections. The first section is just some information about the applicant. Here we're just trying to kind of figure out which type of organization you are, whether that be a local unit of government, a DMO, an arts and cultural organization, or any of the eligible types of organizations you can be. We also have some questions in this section about your staff. We're going to want to know full-time, part-time, and contracted staff numbers. And there will be 2 sections of that. One will be pre-COVID or as of January 1st, and the other will be as of July 1st. So kind of more after the COVID primarily hit. The second section will be your narrative. Your narrative section, you will kind of be describing your operations and how you're going to sustain your operations with these funds. Be sure that you are speaking to the grant application. Make sure that you're talking about the actual arts and cultural activities, if that's only part of your budget. We want to make sure that we're focusing on the things that the funds are going to go towards, and not maybe just everything that your organization does. If everything your organization does is arts and cultural, then go ahead and share about everything your organization does. We also have a section here where you can talk about strategies. This will be how you're going to have a continuation of arts and cultural activities and your relevance to the communities that it serves. The third section, we kind of go over the economic need. This is where you're going to really talk about how COVID impacted your organization. We're also going to be asking here if you've had any other CARES Act dollars that were that you received to help your organization. There'll be a whole list there that you can go through. So if you did receive some, you do need to let us know in your application. The next section that we have will be how your funds will be used. Here you're basically going to just state if they're going to be used for salary expenses, if they're going to be for artists and contractual personnel, if they will be for facility operations, et cetera, et cetera. And the categories are already set up in there with where you can enter dollar amounts. So there are only the specific categories that you can request funds for. It's also important to remember here for the municipalities, the ineligible expenses, any expense not directly associated with the eligible cultural asset or arts and cultural activity. Also, any arts and cultural activity related expense that would be eligible for CARES funding through the Indiana Finance Authority, and any associated costs that are funded by or would normally be funded by tax revenue. This fifth section is basically forms that we're going to be needing. These forms mostly consist of your W-9 and your direct deposit form. There are some instructions there on how to fill out those forms, so be sure that you review those. It's very important that those forms match. They need to have the same information on them, such as the same address, the same federal tax ID number, and they both need to have signatures on them. There are ways to sign them electronically, so please review the instructions in the application itself, and it will tell you how to do it electronically if you need to. And then finally, the sixth section is just a review of your application. As usual with grants, you're going to want to make sure that you go over all the information that you submitted. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it back over to Lewis and Elaine.
Thank you so much, Adam. We do want to just briefly talk about funding level determination and how that's going to happen. So all eligible applicants will receive an award based on the following. The size of the award will be scaled to the applicant's eligible budget size. So again, if you are an arts organization and it's your entire budget, or a DMO and it's your entire budget, so it'll be scaled to that. If not, it'll be to the portion of your budget that does apply. Size of awards will be scaled to previous receipts of CARES funding from other sources to overall organizational or applicable budget. Again, if you received other CARES monies, we will consider this. Does not make you ineligible in any way, but it'll be a consideration point. And the size of awards will be impacted by the total number of eligible applications received and the associated eligible expenses with those applications. So we will try to make this $10 million go as far as it possibly can go in the state to meet the needs that are out there. And then final determination of the award will be limited to applicable qualified expenses as documented in the application. Obviously, even if you have a large budget and have not received CARES funding, if you have very few applicable expenses, it would be limited by that. An allocation committee with representatives both from the Arts Commission and IDDC will recommend final award levels based on the above criteria, as well as representative from the Lieutenant Governor's office. So I think that sums it up. And I know from Bridget in the chat that we have a lot of questions. So we're trying to get through the end of this fairly expediently. So hopefully we can take some questions. Up here now is your timeline for the different benchmarks for this application. It is already open. Due date is September 8th. Award notification in early October. Award granted in mid-November. Expenses incurred again that March 1, 2020 to December 30th, 2020. And there will be a final grant report that is required of you all at the end of March. And I think we are to the question and answer part. So I turn this over to Bridget. Thanks to everyone.
Great. Thank you so much, Louis, Elaine, Adam, and Paige for all that helpful information, and Jody, of course, for the kickoff. So let's get right down to it. So we have a lot of questions in the chat. The first one being, would a Chamber C6 who organizes a festival be eligible?
I think yes, as far as the cost of that festival. So I think, again, eligible expenses, especially if there were any cancellation costs that came along with that festival, those things may apply. Again, if you're serving as that type of entity organizing that festival, you just happen to be housed within the chamber, you should be able to do that. However, you know, if you're a municipality, if you're part of the city government or town government, whatever, then you've got the added restrictions that Louis was mentioning earlier.
Great. Can for-profit organizations who put on a festival apply if they have a charitable element to their festival?
And the answer to this would be no. You have to be legally a not-for-profit organization or a C6 like the DMOs are in order to apply, or a governmental unit. So no, that would not be applicable.
Great. We've received a few questions about people who have received EIDL loans or PPP. How does that affect their ability to receive this funding?
Well, again, to that point, both of those are from CARES Act funds from the federal government. And so we're asking you to disclose those. And obviously those dollars had to be spent on eligible expenses as well. So anything that you ask for has to be net of what you already have spent CARES Act funding on. So any eligible expenses left over that CARES Act funding from all those sources have not covered, you're eligible to request a grant for those dollars.
Great. And then Louis, this one might be related to arts and culture here. We have someone who works for a city. They're wondering if two departments can apply for the same, can apply for this, right? The money will end up being deposited in the same account.
to city departments?
Yes.
Well, if it's a city department, it is the municipality applying for the opportunity. And I suppose either one could be the lead writer of the application, but it would be the municipality that's submitting the application.
Great. Elaine, would government-run DMOs qualify?
By government run, if you mean some of the tourism commissions that serve as DMOs, then they would. If you're, again, doing that process through a chamber, they could apply as well. So it's, we normally have one destination marketing organization. It may be a convention and visitor bureau within, each county. But if you don't have an absence of a DMO, then the organization that's serving in that capacity is eligible.
Okay, awesome. I can answer this one. Woo! Someone asked if Indiana Arts Commission arts organization support grant recipients are eligible, and the answer is yes, you are eligible. We have a question here. Can we include costs for new programs that replaced programming we could not do?
And the answer to that is no, it's not for new programming. However, if you have programming that was originally scheduled in a live format, and now you've incurred some cost to put that into a virtual format, those costs would be eligible to be included. But new programming is not eligible for inclusion.
Okay. This is a question about personnel costs and salary. Would personnel costs work if it were for the same person, but for a different time period? Say you've already applied PPP for me from March through June, but you need to keep me on, you need funding for the rest of the year. Could that work?
Yes, as it's just you can't apply for the exact same cost. So that is a different cost because it's in a different time frame. So
great. Louis, this one is for you. Would an arts association's loss of revenue due to canceling in-person events be eligible?
This is not, CARES money is not intended to be for loss of revenue. It's for expenses. And even though we've talked about loss of revenue, it's actually the program, what is eligible is expenses in this program for every applicant. That is the eligible category.
I think this could go for either of you. There's a question, and I'm not sure I understand it correctly, so I'd just like to get some clarification. Is strategic planning covered under this grant opportunity?
No.
No, okay, that's what I thought. Okay, yeah, so strategic planning is not covered under this grant opportunity. If an organization has been paying salaries all along, can they apply for this grant and put that money towards salary now?
Again, as long as it's an expense in that time period between March 1st and December 30th, it is an eligible expense. So yes, you can use expenses that have already happened for you within that time period. They are eligible.
Great. Another question that I can answer, and I'll take the easy ones, you guys. This one is, if they received Indiana Humanities CARES grants, can they receive this as well? You are eligible to apply for this if you've received humanities money.
But they will have to disclose it.
Yes, you will have to disclose, absolutely. Same with the Indiana Arts Emergency Relief Fund, you'll have to disclose that as well. Louis, sounds like you want to pop in?
Yeah, the rule of thumb is that you need to disclose any funds that have come through any CARES program, no matter what the pathway of that money was.
All right, great explanation. Sorry about that. What if their expenses are greater this year because of COVID than FY19? Will that be taken into account when you're looking at budget size?
Well, I think we're asking for expenses as of this year and eligible expenses without regard to what was spent on the same items last year. So again, if they're eligible expenses between March 1st and December 30th, you can apply for those. Does that answer your question?
I think probably, Elaine, the reason that we're asking for a comparative point to last year is to sort of just document that the organization has need, right?
Correct. And we are asking for revenue from one year to the next for the DMOs.
Yeah, so we're just doing that to just document that the organization has need. But as far as eligible expenses, again, they're the expenses that have been incurred during those that time period for the eligible categories, and that is what is eligible.
Great. We have a question about advertising costs. So are we only looking at advertising costs for next year, not what we spent to promote this year that was canceled?
The marketing expenses are for the reopening of an event or the reopening of the entities, be they hospitality or leisure. So, marketing expenses for programs that you did earlier would not apply, I don't believe. We can check into that, but do you agree with me, Louis, that those would not?
Yeah, I think that's my
eligible.
understanding at least.
We have a question about something in the application. Will people be asking for a certain amount of money? And let's say if the answer is yes, they ask for $100,000 and we don't have $100,000 to give, but we have 75. Is that something that will be considered?
Well, what they're providing are the eligible expenses. So
Right.
We're asking them to provide us what their eligible expenses would be, and then we can then scale that to what we need to. I mean, Louis, you may have other thoughts on this as well, but as we mentioned, we're going to have to look at everybody because we don't know what the total amount of ask may be. And then we're trying to be fair to everyone that makes application.
That's an excellent answer. And I don't think you should, as an organization, think about that you're applying for X amount of dollars. You're simply showing us your eligible expenses according to CARE. We are going to take into consideration your overall budget or the budget of the portion of your budget that applies in scaling these awards, but we don't know exactly what that scale could possibly look like before we have every application in our hand with the intent that we want to try to meet as many needs as we can.
Question, how do we show expenses incurred through the end of the year if the application is due September 8th?
So those could be projected expenses that you intend to incur during that time frame.
Great.
Again, be careful not to overestimate, because again, if you do not incur those expenses, you're going to be required to give that money back, because you're again going to have to show in your reporting where you spent all those dollars. And if you can't get them spent for activities that incur before December 30th, then you're going to have to send that money back. So we want to make sure you don't go overboard. We want you to be as realistic as possible.
And in that light, think about if you're going to do kind of those short amount of future expenses within that time frame from when you apply. Think of things that you're going to spend, like rent or maybe personnel costs, those kind of things that are not going to be variable, and so that that you're going to incur.
Right. And I think in the case of the destination marketing organizations, they may have a marketing plan that they're putting together for this reopening due to COVID. So, bring that plan forward, knowing that you're going to be able to actually expend all those dollars, but that probably is pretty reasonable to think that you can.
Great advice. Elaine, this question is for you. I am a DMO that is run by the county. Would the county government need to apply, or could the Tourism Commission, government appointed, apply? Who should be the applicant?
I think in that case, the Tourism Commission. If there's still some doubt about that, we can talk offline to make sure that we've got the right group. But if there is a separate Tourism Commission, we want them to be able to be the applicant.
Okay. Would an organization that was created because of COVID to help arts venues be eligible?
So first of all, it would have to be a not-for-profit organization.
Yeah.
And certainly it would be COVID-related expenses. Again, I think that's probably an offline conversation we'd have to see if that's somehow new programming or a service, something. So I don't know the answer to that question. That one is stumping me at the moment, but we can consider an answer to that question for sure. So
Yeah.
But I think you did hit on it. It needs to be a nonprofit. So it has to be a 501c3. So if it's a for-profit entity who's helping organizations respond to their COVID needs, it probably doesn't apply. But if you're a nonprofit doing something along those lines, again, we should probably talk about that.
Okay, Elaine, this is a question for you. We are a DMO under the facility operational cost eligibility segment where insurance is listed. Does that refer to employee health insurance costs or business insurance costs or both?
Actually, I think it probably applies to both. When you think about the PPP, it covered employee benefits and insurance and those type of health benefits as well. So I think we'd be going along on the same lines.
in the application, perhaps you would want to list that under personnel costs rather than insurance costs. I don't know, that's a categorization of that expense, but yeah, it seems like it would be eligible.
All right. For reporting, will you need physical receipts for expenses, or what kind of reporting will be required?
Yes, and you know, we'll get that whole reporting format put together for you, but keep all of those, even if we don't request the actual evidence of spending. You need to have it. So we'll work on what we really need from you, but it's going to be quite important that you do that. We understand there may be some auditing that will happen because of this.
Just to augment that, if the federal government should want to audit this program, they could ask for that information and that documentation from any grantee of the program. So you should be prepared to have that on record.
What if COVID cases increase and the state of Indiana closes DMOs again? Then the money isn't spent as projected. So I think this goes back to how would you advise thinking about what those incurred costs are going to be?
That's a good question, and you know, that's something that none of us know the answer to, whether or not we'll end up, you know, needing to close down more. But the hope is that we don't. Yet some of those expenses, particularly in the area of personnel, will continue on and would still be eligible costs. Your overhead would still be eligible. You may choose not to do some of the marketing, and that might be something that if there is an expense like that and you do get approved for it, please let us know immediately if that happens, because we're going to have to figure out if there's another way that we can spend those dollars. Because if the state doesn't spend the dollars, either through you spending them, the state will have to give those dollars back to the federal government. So we'll need to know that ahead of time to make, you know, whatever contingency plans we need to.
Yeah. Can 501c4s apply, such as a festival?
No, 501c4s are not eligible to apply for a number of reasons, but they are not eligible to apply. That would be in the category many times of an organization that's established to support another organization. And as we've said, fundraising expenses are not eligible, and it would only be expenses associated with the 501c4, not the 501c3 that it might be there to benefit. So, no, 501c4s are not eligible to apply for this program. A 501c3 could, obviously, if it has a 501c4 associated with it, the 501c3 can apply, but the 501c4 cannot.
Okay. Can a DMO submit for all eligible expenses, or do we need to choose marketing or personnel or rent, etc.?
They're going to ask you to itemize those expenses. I believe that's correct, right, on the application. So,
and again, all your eligible expenses you should document to us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. This person is asking, they have a few furloughed employees as of March. If awarded, they would love to be able to bring their employees back. Would their projected wages also be eligible under the wages and salary segment?
Could you repeat that question again?
Yeah.
Sure. So this person, they have 4 furloughed employees, have to specify you've got to be a nonprofit to begin with. So that's the first checkpoint.
Or a DMO.
Or DMO, correct. Yes, Elaine. So they're asking, if awarded, would we be able to bring their projected wages? Oh, excuse me. Let me just repeat the whole question. If awarded, we would love to be able to bring these employees back. Mm-hmm. Would their projected wages also be eligible under the wages and salary segment?
Yes, if you're bringing them back and they were furloughed because of this, then absolutely.
But again, it would only pertain to the time frame between Correct. March 1st and December 30th. So if you're bringing them back and you're not bringing them back till November 15th, then only from November 15th, right. December 30th, would that be an eligible expense.
Great clarification, Lewis. Our arts association is unable to host in-person events and share art supplies. We're offering to purchase or send individual kits for a specific online painting class. Would those expenses be covered?
Again, the only consumables that are available are things that are in the category of PPE. So if you are, as an organization, buying PPE supplies or creating signage or flyers to deal with the PPE, those things would be SPPE, those things would be eligible, but consumables are not.
Okay. When we cut our budget back in March, we also cut retirement for our full-time employees. Would employee retirement costs be an eligible projected expense under personnel expense segment?
Again, the PPP program from the federal government allowed you to include retirement benefits as part of the employee expense. So I think that would be eligible as well. Again, the employees were there. I mean, you're paying for that, or you're paying
right.
for that. So.
And again, it would have to be retirement money contributed for the period, again, that this is eligible for. So if it was an annual contribution, would probably have to be prorated for the amount of time right. or something. So just again, it is a personnel cost, but it has to be specific to that time frame.
And can one of you define PPE for us?
Personal protection equipment. So it was the mask, shields, plexiglass that you had to put up, the gowns if you had to do something like that in your, well, probably wouldn't apply, but those kinds of things that you had to do to make your facility, to be able to open your facility for your employees and for any guests that might be coming through.
It could also include things like hand sanitizer. It could include signage for social distancing or exit and entry points. All of those things are part of PPE. Anything that makes, again, your facility or your organization safer from a public health standpoint in response to COVID-19.
Great, thanks for that clarification. For whoever asked that question, it's a great question. Our DMO has several festivals operating under its umbrella. Can the DMO apply for each festival, or do you recommend consolidating into one application?
You would want to probably consolidate that into one application. Again, the festival itself isn't the application entity, it's the entity that's putting on the festival. I mean, Lewis, do you want to add anything to that? I mean, so I think it makes sense to be the DMO itself.
Yeah, I mean, so I think, again, the DMO, if it is the umbrella for that, and those have eligible expenses, they can include that within their eligible expenses in their application, correct?
But I would mention that they're only eligible expenses if they were due to a cancellation. In other words, we had rented a facility, canceled it, we couldn't get our money back. If you got your money back, it's not eligible. So it's any expenses that were incurred because something was closed down.
Right.
A festival.
Right. Okay. It's, again, think about expenses. Again, don't think about income. When we normally sold 5,000 tickets to this festival, you cannot apply for those $5,000 worth of tickets. You can only apply for expenses.
Thank you. This question is popping up. We're a nonprofit religious organization. Would we qualify if the expenses were in the appropriate categories for arts and cultural expenses?
Yes, as long as the expenses aren't associated with a religious service of some sort. So a good example might be there's a church that does a Renaissance festival that incurred expenses for artists that they had contracted, that they had to cancel the Renaissance festival. That would apply. Or perhaps a performing arts venue that belongs to a religious private college or something like that. Again, yes, that could be, but not for anything associated with a religious service.
This question, I'm not sure if the organization that asked is an arts nonprofit or not. I'm going to err on the side and say they're not, but their now exhausted PPP was used for all salaries, including non-artistic staff. These non-arts salaries would not be included in the IDDC app budget. How should we convey this in the application or budget?
So again, we are asking for, again, I don't know what kind of organization this is, but we are asking for the applicable budget associated with their arts and cultural activity. So if you're an organization, for instance, that does non-arts activities, like a girls' club, for instance, but then does arts activity, you could use personnel costs associated with those arts and cultural activities. They could be things that are direct, like, oh, we have a program manager that does the arts and cultural activity, but it could also be indirect, that 10% of our 10% of our accounting department processes the arts and cultural activity expenses, etc. So you can use personnel costs that are associated with those activities as part of your overall budget. So I would think about in terms of what percentage of your overall budget is that budget, and that might be direct costs, and that might be some indirect services that other departments provide for those arts and cultural services. That those might be facility costs, it could be accounting costs, it could be whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Again, as long as they're in the eligible categories, right? Not fundraising, et cetera. So.
Yeah. Thanks for that clarification, Lewis. And I'll ask you to follow up on this one. Can you please clarify if the cost associated with programming that was once live had to go virtual is covered? So say now they're making items that are consumable take-home art kits instead of having people come in. Is that an eligible expense?
Again, as I understand it, consumables are not eligible, but other costs associated that would be associated with that pivoting might be, like technology costs, et cetera, that are in categories that are allowed to be expended.
Great. All right, we are nearing the end of our time here today. Thank you so much, Lewis and Elaine, for answering all of these really great questions. Folks, if we haven't had a chance to get to your question or didn't answer it to quite the extent that you would like or still need some clarification, please reach out to Adam or Paige. We'll go ahead and drop their information in the chat box now. I'm looking at you, Anna, virtually, if you could please do that for us. And our program managers will get back to you about those questions. But I encourage you all, like Paige had mentioned, to please take a look at that frequently asked questions document. That I think will help clear up a lot of your questions and help you through the application process. So in the next 24 hours, we will send out a follow-up from this conversation with some of those other CARES Act items that Lewis had mentioned through Indiana Finance Authority. And then we'll also, of course, send out the guidelines to this in case you haven't seen them yet, and the application along with that frequently asked questions document. That's all I have. Lewis and Elaine, would you like to say any words before we leave today?
Well, the only thing I might mention is that if you're an arts organization, you'll get one set of questions. If you're a DMO, you'll get a different set of questions. And so this is a question I'm going to ask on behalf of some of the organizations that have received a lot of CARES Act funding in the past. are they supposed to be putting in eligible expenses net of what they already had paid eligible expenses? So in other words, they're not applying for funding of something that has already been paid, or are they supposed to put all of their eligible expenses in? Okay.
No, the application will only, we're asking for the eligible expenses.
Just what's left over from what CARES Act
Correct.
funding has not paid for before. Okay.
Correct.
Correct.
So
And it's clear in the application.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
And also, I would just stress that, as you all can tell, this is a little complex, and there's a bit of nuance here as to what is and what isn't. And so keep checking that frequently asked questions document, because we'll try to refine things as we go down. And obviously what people apply for in some of those gray areas will be the thing that causes us to get some finer answers to some of these questions, and to we'll be kind to you, be kind to us too, because we are like you, trying to navigate this correctly according to the law of the CARES Act, and there, as you know, that was a piece of legislation that happened pretty quickly, so they didn't think about everything too. So we'll get the right answers, but it might take a little time. So please be patient with us as well.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for Jody giving us that warm welcome, Elaine, of course, and Adam and Paige for giving us that application overview. Everyone, I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon, and I'll see you in your inbox in the next day or so. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye, guys.